Welcome to our pod, and by that I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are usually two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series one book at a time. But today is a Tuesday, which means we're talking TV with three best friends because we are welcoming back to the podcast Moses Utomi. Welcome back.
Thanks. Yay. Glad to be back.
Yeah, and we are discussing some Jujutsu Kaisen today, season 1 of this anime television series. And first off, Moses, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with the show?
Yeah, I was a latecomer. So I'd heard about the show. I'd seen clips here and there. People were telling me to watch it, but I just couldn't get to it. And then I finally got to it. And then I binge watched it over the course of like a week or something. Like I watched a lot of it really quick. So I'm a fan.
That's amazing. Laura, what's your experience with the show?
So my experience was that I was reading a lot more manga, and I got the first 4 volumes from the library, and then the rest of them were like on infinite hold because everyone was reading them, and there's like an immense line to read these manga apparently. So I just decided I would jump into the anime, and then I also binged the season very quickly, and yeah, I really loved it. Like, I've watched a few anime shows, but I'm fairly new to anime as like a TV genre, but this one I think is one of my favorites for sure.
Nice.
Hannah, what about you?
And my experience is Laura and Moses wanted to do a TV Tuesday on this. So I binged the series over the course of a week and forgot that I was watching it and had to binge it all in 3 days because I got halfway through and then I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot I was supposed to be watching this, and then continued to watch it. So pure procrastination when you're busy. But it was a good time, and I had great fun trying to figure out all the different storylines because this is an original Japanese anime television series following Yuji Itadori as a high school student who in the first episode eats the finger of a cursed object, a powerful monster known as a curse of Sukuna. And Ryman Sukuna, and he joins the high school of Jujutsu Kaisen along with Megumi Fushiguro and Satoru Gojo as their teacher. And it's just kind of about their experience in high school fighting these cursed monsters. So that's kind of a broad overview, but we're going to do a much deeper dive today. So can you guys tell me a little bit about what you love about the show and like things that stand out to you, as you continue on your journey with Jujutsu Kaisen?
I'll be honest, I didn't appreciate the first season as much as I should have when I was watching it. It took me a while to get into, like, I binged it because it was very bingeable, but the first season I was like, there's a lot going on. Like, there's a lot to keep track of. And I also I watched a good amount of anime, and so I felt like in some places it felt very familiar, bordering on derivative. I was like, I saw this in Naruto, I saw this in Chainsaw Man, I saw this here and there. And so I was a little bit, especially because there's so much hype, people were really, really pushing on me. So I was a little bit of a hater, to be honest. At the beginning, I was like, it's not that good. And then there's an episode where Yuji first gets the whole cursed energy system first gets explained to him. And he's like in that basement and he's learning about how to use it. And I was like, to me, when I'm consuming any media, I always like look for the places where the creator spent the most time and attention. And that's where I was like, oh, this guy put a lot of thought into this. Like, there's something here that's going to unfold throughout the show. And this is kind of the key to understanding the show, is like coming to appreciate the complexity of this cursed energy system. So that was when I finally like bought in, and that kind of carried me through the show. Like, I love following the nuances of that. I've read the manga, I've finished it up, and I think that's a really cool part of it.
I love that you said that because I too like wasn't super into it until about that scene. Like, once that scene hit, I was like, oh, this is beautiful world building. And like, I'm not sure if I'm enjoying the show at this moment, but like I am enjoying all the complexities of like the curses and how it works with different people's like powers and energies. And like, oh gosh, I really loved that. So I'm glad that that spoke to you as well.
I think we get crumbs though of that early on though, because I get like a lot of themes of like throughout the entire season of like the concept of like rebirth and death and like meaning in life, and also just like how power can affect a person in their life. But I think there's like crumbs of that in those first episodes. And so I do think that there definitely are like moments throughout the first season where there's like huge shifts in
Mm.
what's happening. And I think that's definitely one of them, where it starts off kind of following like this very formulaic, like, this is an anime, this is what we expect
Right.
situation. And then all of a sudden it's just like, okay, we're turning the key. And then we ramp it up, and it's got a few of those moments, honestly, that kind of escalate things to another level. And that definitely is one of them. So, yeah, I think it's neat to pick up on moments like that, too, like early on, where
Mm.
I think even like in the first episode when we're talking with Yuji's grandfather, who is like this curmudgeonly old man that's dying, and he's like, do something with your life, like don't come here, like have purpose in your life and everything, help people. Like I think even just that is, I mean, we also have those type of themes in like Bleach and stuff like that too, but I think that this then kind of takes a lot of these like stereotypical like themes in anime and just escalates them.
Mm.
Yeah. I like what you said because I do feel like that is something that we come back to again and again in the series is like Yuji's need to help others. And a lot of people talk about it as like his fatal flaw because he cares too much for people. And he really, and at one point he's like, I would never kill a human no matter what. But it also shows that like there are certain moments in life where it's like one door opens and another like shuts, where he could feel like very nihilistic when he loses his grandpa and he could turn to like a little bit more selfish, but he decides not to do that. And then there are other characters in this season who do take the more selfish route or who do kind of say like, well, the like people have no hearts and they don't care, and he tends to see the good in others, and I think that that's also very apt throughout the show where you kind of where it ramps up a lot.
He definitely is like a bastion of goodness, though, that can be a little bit too much at times. Like, I think that that's maybe why he is the perfect vessel for Ryomen Sukuna, is because he is just like so good, like overwhelmingly good, that there has to be a balance to this extreme evil
Yeah.
that exists there in Sukuna. And I think on like when you're talking about like the goodness that exists there and this like desire to help people, like the moments with Junpei are
Mhm.
like really critical to a lot of what happens for Yuji and like the caring that he has for others and like how he kind of develops going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good thing to highlight because I think when I was initially watching it, I came across the Junpei arc. I think that's when it fully hit me who Yuji is. I think before that, I was like, just like protagonist, especially he's
Mhm.
introduced as like super athletic. And so I think that kind of imprinted onto me. I was like, oh, this is his character. He's this like freak athlete. And then, but that's not really it's part of who he is, but it's not essential. It's not the defining aspect. It was when Junpei comes along, I was like, oh, this is, I think, his defining characteristic that he's like endlessly hopeful
Mhm.
in the goodness of others.
Mhm. To the
That's
frustration of viewers and also the other characters, honestly.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
Megami, I think, is always like standing over in the corner, like rolling his eyes at anything that Yuji does.
yeah.
so funny that you mentioned his athleticism because it was the thing I kept forgetting until it would randomly pop back up. And I was like, oh, right. He's super athlete. Like, but he doesn't care about it. So I
No.
kept forgetting about it.
Right.
Like, he was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't really care about sports. I'm just good at them. And it's like, well, that's, people are created in all shapes and sizes. So, uh,
I love just like from the beginning though, where they're trying to like highlight how good he is at anything related to being athletic, or the even the teacher at the school is like, I will challenge you. And it's just like the ridiculousness of this, where the teacher is challenging him to try to get him to join any of the teams at the school. And he's
I
just like, I don't want to do this, but okay, I can throw this.
think this is boring. So I'm going to do this really well so I don't have to do it ever
Mhm.
again.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I really loved the Junpei arc. I think that was probably my favorite
Mhm.
arc of the entire series, just because it seemed like the most human and the one that had like the biggest discussion of humanity and what it meant to be good or bad, because Junpei is someone who's bullied and who deals with like a lot of unrest at home, and he wants structure and he wants like appreciation, and he doesn't get it, and he kind of turns to the dark side, and not so many words. And I really liked seeing his friendship with Yuji, and like the fact that he still wanted to turn to like the easier, like, I want retribution, I don't want to hurt anymore, even though Yuji was sitting there like, I gave you friendship, I did that. And it's like, well, that's not enough sometimes, and sometimes it's just too
Mm-hmm.
late. And I thought I really appreciated that story arc.
I think it's also
Yeah.
interesting too because like his mother was somewhat supportive. So but it also just kind of ties into like the complexities involved in a situation like that where you're going to feel so like I don't know if either of you remember from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, there's a song where it's like, no one else is singing my song. Like, no one else can understand what I'm going through and everything.
Yeah.
And I think we often get into a situation and we feel like no one can possibly connect with us and what we're going through. And sometimes it is, like you said, Hannah, like a little too late. And
Yeah.
that's unfortunately what happens for Junpei, where it's just like, yeah, he wants to have all of this support and some of it's there, but he's just not able to recognize it.
Well, but there's also hints that his mom is an alcoholic and she doesn't have
Yes.
the best structure. And so, like,
Mm-hmm.
I also think that that's really effective because it shows like Yuji had a cantankerous grandfather who
Mm-hmm.
was like hard, but he did love his grandson and he did teach him
Mm-hmm.
to like want better. But then with Junpei's mom, you kind of see like the reverse of like she loves and she
Yes.
seems sweet, but she has severe like lacking when it comes to actually being there as a like support
Mm-hmm.
for her son. And even with like he has this memory of her that he loves so much after she passes away suddenly. I was not expecting that. That was a
Yeah,
whiplash
that
of
was
a moment.
shocking.
um but he has this memory of her where like the kindness he remembers is her not making him go to school, but it wasn't her like trying to get him help or assistance. It was her being like, well, you don't have to go, it doesn't matter. Like, and so I
Mm-hmm.
did see a little bit of that, of it was like a more complex story than what we got to see in the couple of episodes. And I thought it was really effective at showing us like there's so much more to the story and we're being dropped in at like a very specific moment.
Right. That's how I felt through a lot of season one. And there, like we said before, there were these moments of transcendence where I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna remember that. That feels like I trust the author because he gave me this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the other parts I'm kind of figuring out I'm okay with. I think that was one. Um, and I think my thoughts are getting away from me. Gojo, the introduction of Gojo was one. That's what I wanted to get to. Not his first moment, the moment between him and Jogo when they have their battle and he fully explains Limitless and he brings Yuji to watch. That is such a that moment I think is so indicative and such an encapsulation of what the series is for from part of the series. Some of it is
Mm-hmm.
Yuji and this emotional connection to who he is, but I think Gojo is such the other
Mm-hmm.
gravity of the series. And I think that moment encapsulates him so well and how it like very, very, very lightly gets at that idea of power that you were mentioning earlier, Laura, and like how
Mm-hmm.
power affects somebody. And Gojo is like the power of this universe, and you can see he's warped by it in a way that is fascinating. It's super compelling to watch.
Yeah. Gojo was definitely the standout character for me overall throughout the series. I
Same.
loved him.
He's my favorite character. I think it's so interesting too, though. There's like a huge love for Gojo
Right.
online, but apparently the author is a little bit anti-Gojo.
Really?
Yeah,
Huh. I wonder
which
why. Is
is
it just like too too charismatic, too perfect?
I'm too great, I guess. But he'll like complain about him online and be like, "Yeah, well, Gojo sucks," or he would probably say this, and it's like, okay, but you created this character. Odd choice to make that type of comment, but whatever.
I
Interesting.
heard that, yeah, when he created Gojo, he kind of just gave him everything good. Like he made him
Mm.
the best looking, the most powerful, the
Mhm.
most charismatic. And I can see how from a like creative perspective, there's it's kind of like Superman. It's a little, people like Batman more for a reason. There's something like
Yeah.
cool about having
Yeah.
an edge and having a tragic backstory, whereas he's been crushing it since he was like 6, like that's kind of his whole thing.
Mhm.
This is the sad moment where I admit that I am Team Superman and I am alone on a very, very small hill.
I thought you were going to admit, Hannah, the thing that we talked about yesterday, which is like the in the end credits of like the first half of the season where they have the cartoon Gojo dancing, that we're both like, are we attracted to this cartoon?
Fair. No, I love a character who's like so powerful but like hates themselves. I don't know why, but it like
Mhm.
speaks to like every like emotional moment for me. So I feel like that hits with Gojo, and I think comparing him to Superman is very apt. But I will say there is a one final credit scene where Gojo like jokingly hits on one of the students, and I did Google how old he was at that moment because it did creep me out a little bit. I was like, he is an adult man, and these are 15-year-olds. He needs
Is
to step
that
away.
which
Like,
student? Oh, I don't know if I saw that
um,
scene.
it's
I'm trying to
one where
remember.
they all think that sorry, I've only watched the show once, but
No, it's fine.
the other first year, the male first year, they think he's getting hit on, and they all run
Megami.
after Megami, and they all like run after to like watch him get hit on, and they all pretend to hit on him to like make him
That's like towards the
uncomfortable.
end, I think, of the
Yeah, it's
season.
like one of the final episodes, and then Gojo
Yeah.
is like, "We have to go study, and I'm gonna be your tutor." And I was like, "How old is that man?" Like, I immediately went to like, "Please step away. I don't even want to hear a joke about that. Excuse you."
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was a very weird end credit scene. It was the one end credit scene where I was like, "That's strange."
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but those usually don't matter too much unless one of them is talking about making a skeletal coat rack, and then it is brought back in the next episode. And that was the one callback to a final credit scene I saw. So
I feel like they really became kind of throwaway end credit scenes like in the second half of the season.
I mean, I still giggle over there's one end credit scene, not to take us on a tangent of end credit scenes, but there is one where Panda gets mad because they all say, like, oh, I'm a cat person. Oh, I'm a dog person. He's like, the answer is, of course, Panda. And then he's like, I feel like none of you like me. And Yuji is like, there were only two options. And then in the next episode, they're arguing over rice or noodles. And he's like, the answer is bread. That's because I'm a panda. And then he's sitting there pouting and he goes, I don't know. This one feels kind of forced. And I did
Honestly,
laugh a lot at that.
how did you guys feel about the character of Panda? Because I don't know why I found Panda to be ridiculous, but also a fun character and pretty interesting too.
That's, I mean, you summed it up. He's ridiculous. he's completely ridiculous. But yeah, I think this show does it a lot with a lot of the characters where they're kind of ridiculous on the surface. But then there's more heart to them than you expect. And like as that unfolds, and like Panda's story is kind of interesting. Like it's kind of meaningful and
Yeah, because we find out he's
yeah,
this like cursed corpse that has like his siblings within him
right.
and that he can like channel their power too and like access their hearts and everything, which is super interesting and also very helpful if you need to just like access that in a fight. Like,
Suddenly
oh,
become a gorilla.
I'm just gonna be access my brother who's a gorilla, like his power now because unfortunately my panda powers are gone. I'm like, okay, well that's convenient, but
Yeah.
it's also just pretty interesting. And like you said, a little bit sad too because he grows up basically isolated and just knowing he's going to be kind of raised for this, and it's a little bit unfortunate.
Yeah.
I think something that was really effective about the show is a lot of times it gives you kind of a one note character or the stereotype. So you have like Yuji, who is the stereotypical protagonist, and then you have Megumi, who is like stereotypical dark sad boy, and then you have
I love Megami.
Nobara, who is like stereotypical so much more than this provincial life, and then you have Panda, who's like, oh, sidekick, like, and it's all very one note, but then throughout the course of the series you find out that there's a lot more to them. And I really thought Panda's storyline was really effective because his power is very interesting. It's very dark if you think about like this animated corpse, but he fights against another character who is a similar like animated like robot. But Panda has this view of I am different, but why would I want to be the same as everyone else? I'm okay in my isolation, and like I don't really want to be a human. And so I don't feel bad that I'm not like everyone or that they may not fully accept me. But you have this other character who deeply wants to be accepted. And like he helps that character grow and like find a part of themselves that they didn't know. And I thought that was really effectively done for a character who would usually just be the animal sidekick.
Right. Yeah.
What? Are you talking about the student from the other school,
Yes.
Mekamaru.
Mekamaru?
Mekamaru,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think it's interesting too with like Mekamaru because if I'm understanding right, like the way that it's set up is that he Mekamaru has like physical limitations, but is
Mhm.
able to like access a higher power, and it's like he's disabled, but also like extra powerful at the
Mhm.
same time, which is incredibly well done, honestly, in my mind, to depict disability like that. And it's done in other characters too, where it's like not seen as a weakness to have a disability, but it like elevates you to this higher power, which I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
not
I
remembering the
really
term
liked
of what
that
it's called.
character.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna second both what you just both said that yeah, their interaction, the fact that they interacted and the fact that we got to see each of them through each other's eyes was a really smart way to go about kind of showing us their complexities.
Hmm.
Well, we get a lot during the student exchange missions with everyone fighting, and they get like paired up with almost their like dual
Right. Yeah.
They're the
character.
version of them from the other school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you have like Maki, who was one of my favorite characters, and she is a student who doesn't really have any like powers, but she's able to utilize like cursed objects in a way that is very skilled. And you find out like she is very strong and a little bit more superhuman when it comes to these types of objects. And I really loved her character and like the juxtaposition with her sister, who does have all this power, but is like angry because Maki is like more powerful and also like resentful of Maki because Maki
Kind of
comes from
forced her into that.
well, because Maki is from like a clan that really values people with these powers, and she doesn't have it. So they were going to force her into being like their maid or their servant. And she was like, nope,
Mhm.
I'm going to become powerful and you can't stop me. But then her twin sister, because of it, has no other choice than to
Mhm.
also enter into school. And I really thought that was interesting to kind of
And
have
also
those
just like
two.
that duality of her being like, well, just because you wanted it doesn't mean that I wanted it. I was kind of okay just like being the maid and just kind of hanging out and doing that type of thing. And it's fascinating to see that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna put my hater hat on back a little bit. I remember being really frustrated with like the inter school arc because I remember thinking one, I was like, this is definitely something I've seen in a lot of anime. The whole like tournament arc. Let's think of a reason to explain everybody's powers in like 8 episodes. And also thinking like it felt like a lack of world building that there weren't more students. I was like, well, so like
That's true.
this is like a school or like a club, you know, like how's this really a school? It's like 6 people here, 6 people there. Um, and so for some of it, I think I was kind of jaded. I was like, this sucks. I'm just learning, like getting info dump and power dump and backstory and flashback. Um, but it was important. It was super important to, I think, rounding out. In a way, it did speak to the world building. Like this isn't like I'm a fan of My Hero Academia, and like there's more characters there than the brain can keep track of. It's like really built out to be an actual school. Um, but this isn't that. You know, like
Yeah.
it's not like this is a very like rare and dangerous business, and the people who do it are kind of screwy. Like all of
Yeah.
the like actual professionals we meet are have something very wrong. Like this is not like a fun world. Um, and so it did kind of build the world in that way, where it's like, yeah, this is all that we have. Like this is the next generation. There's not a ton of them. They each kind of have tragic backstories and kind of dark histories and family drama and strife, and like they're kind of figuring things out as they develop and do who they're going to be. And so by the end of it, I could, especially how it ended, it was super sick when everybody showed up and it tied into the bigger story. But
Mhm.
it took me a while to appreciate it as I was going through it.
It's funny that you say that because I didn't even think about the fact that there were only that number of students there. I don't know why. I was just like, they only sent their best to compete at this thing. It never like crossed my mind that there could be like, oh, hundreds of students that
Mm-hmm.
had the opportunity to go to this. But I do think if we're talking about like that ending of that arc, that was probably my favorite part of the whole season was like the
The baseball
veil
scene.
and not the
I'm
baseball
joking.
scene. I care less about the baseball thing, but even though we learn more about Megami through it, apparently, but just like the veil and the importance of Gojo is kind of revealed in that moment even more, where it's like, yeah, all of these cursed people are and people that are utilizing cursed energy very much have their eyes on Gojo at all times, and he's
Mhm.
just essential to all of their plans because they want him out of the picture so that they can do whatever it is they want to do. And I just thought that it was just like really interesting, almost Lord of the Rings-esque, where it's like pull their eyes over here so that we can do this over there. And I also love any moment that Gojo is like domain expansioning all over the place. That's just amazing. But it was just really, really a cool thing. So
It
Yeah,
also
it's
gave a, oh, go ahead.
no, you go first.
I was just gonna say it also like has some of the best cursed like objects or cursed like
yes.
monsters. I loved all of them. I thought that they were
Mhm.
fascinating.
Mhm. Yeah, what's their? I forget the name of the squad, what their name was, but yeah, they're great villains, and I think that whole plot. We're gonna talk about Gojo. Sorry, I'm gonna keep pushing towards Gojo, but like just as a from a character design perspective, like having a character who like the entire universe orbits around, and he's not the main character is really cool. Like it has a really
Mhm.
cool effect, and it changes how you appreciate every other character. It changes their interactions. It it changes how you look at Yuji because he's supposed to be the main character, but there's this other like thing tugging on your attention the whole time, and the attention of every other character.
Mhm.
So it's yeah, when he shows up or when they put the veil out, and it's like this whole thing is just it's just for Gojo. Like he always needs to be considered all the time. It's a really non-visual way of establishing a character's power. Like you're very
Mhm.
aware, you've seen it, but like you're very aware of how strong he is the whole time. And two, it just keeps your brain thinking about him a lot. You know, like what is this guy capable of, and how is this world going to function? You know, with him in it.
It's
Well, and it
also
also has you questioning, like, with how nonchalant he comes off in all
Mm-hmm.
of the situations. Like, shouldn't you care a little more, Gojo? Like, what's going on here?
I was gonna say it makes it interesting when he like taps out of a fight and he's like, I trust other people to grow and
Yeah,
expand. And this
Yeah.
I don't think anything bad will happen to them if I'm not here. But if you
he's
guys
a
need
really
me, I'll
effective
be there.
teacher in that way.
Yeah. Like he's never
Hands
stepping
off.
in and being like, it's my show. He is
Right.
actually often being like, this is not my show. I'm just here to
Hmm.
be a side character.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love it as like sorry, this is the writerly brain. Like as a essentially anytime you have like ultimate power in a series or whatever, like it functions as kind of God in a way. Like it's kind of an commentary on God. And I think like if you've seen the movie Ex Machina or
Hmm.
like Rick and Morty, I do think there's like these fascinating portrayals of God as like Doctor Who is I think a good example too of just like above it all, which I think makes sense, especially I think the way Gojo is shown in Gojo is so sensical where like he literally can't be touched. Like this the world is not a dangerous place for him. You know, it's not a place of
Hmm.
I
mystery
love
and wonder and fear. Like
Hmm.
those things aren't happening for him. So it's like there's no
I love your
stakes.
examples because my brain went to the evil side of thinking about Mark Zuckerberg in the social network, where he's like, I'm not here. I'm back at Facebook. And I was
Right.
like, oh gosh, Gojo is not Mark Zuckerberg, I swear.
Well, that's so good because like it's that's I'm glad you said that because
Yeah.
there is that it's a very finely balanced sword where like when
Hmm.
you see Gojo use his power, he is terrifying. Like even the animation, the way his eyes look, the way his hair flares out, like
Hmm.
he's not drawn as like Superman powering up to punch, you know, Luther. He's drawn as like this really terrifying power. And I think that's very deliberate because he is that. Like he,
Yeah.
we're on one side of the discussion, but as we see the cursed spirits get humanized to some extent, and we like learn their story and their motivations, like that, yeah, Gojo he's just terrifying. And
Yeah.
the fact that he's so nonchalant and distant is like the only thing that keeps us from being constantly terrified of him because we
Yeah.
know for the most part he doesn't care. But if he
Yeah.
was like really active in this world in a way, it'd be very disruptive. Like he's a real problem for better and for worse.
It's honestly terrifying to think of, like, if he cared more, like, what would happen?
Right. Yeah.
If he was a less effective teacher, what would happen?
Yeah.
But
I
it
do think
is.
the concept of humanity is interesting too, though, because when they're talking about these cursed spirits or these objects that are like becoming more human, developing a language, they're starting to kind of freak out about that type of thing in
Mhm,
general. And even towards like the end of the season, that when Yuji and Nobara are fighting those two brothers, they have this moment where they're like, after they take them out, they're just like very bothered by the fact that those were humans. And
mhm.
so I think just like dealing with the reality of these cursed spirits becoming more human and acknowledging that, yeah, we not only have to deal with cursed objects and cursed spirits, but we're now dealing with things that have emotions and are human like, have feelings, have all of these different, you know, things about them that are similar to us and even like other humans that are working against us now. We didn't expect these type of things to happen. I think that's a really like interesting concept to play with for these characters that are trying to go into this type of profession, really, where it's going to be a lot more of that happening for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
think
think
that's
that's, yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I mean, I think that scene you mentioned toward the end when they fight those brothers is great, and their reaction to it is great because when you think about what the villains, it's Mahito, right? I forget his name. Mahito and the whole squad, what they
Hmm.
want, really, they
Mhm,
just want a world in which they can exist as living things, like a
Hmm.
world that is created for them, which is
yeah.
like it feels villainous because we know what that would entail for humans, but it's not. That's a really normal thing for living creatures to want a world in which they're allowed
Yeah.
to exist. And so there, that humanization of them, I think, adds a lot to the show.
I also think it like is very effective how they use Mahito because he was my favorite of the curses throughout the entire show because he's one of the earlier ones we get introduced to and he's probably one of the more human ones. Like there are a couple who enter in who don't look human, but then they introduce us to him and he has like human wants and human like kind of interests and human like ideals about like nihilism and things like that. And so like
And
he
he
is
yearns for greater understanding too.
right. And so I think that almost lets us in on the secret before the characters catch up to it. Where in the final episodes, they are dealing with the like fact that these two cursed people were human. And when they died, they didn't just disappear into a puff of smoke. And there's like actually
Mhm.
a reality to death now that they didn't have to contend with before. And I think like we kind of knew that seeing Mojito before this happened. And it was very interesting to kind of see that grow throughout the series.
Yeah, and I won't spoil season 2 for you, but like I think a great contrast is the fact that again the sorcerers are often very messed up people. Like they're other the first we had the first years, but like the professionals are a bit weird. Like Mei Mei
Yeah.
is a weird person. She's
Yeah.
a pretty strange person. Um,
I mean,
I,
she does have that terrifying laugh right there at the end when she receives that transfer from Gojo, where it's like, okay, stop laughing like that.
right. Yeah. Yeah. She's like this. Yeah. I won't say more about her, but like Gojo's a weird person. She's a weird person. So like you have these really, really powerful, weird people who are the good guys. And then you have these like thoughtful, kind of reasonably motivated, like bad guys. And I think it's very well done.
Yeah.
I
Although
think
I
it's
did love May
interesting too,
May's
just in
hair.
like
So
the way that they're drawn, that they start to become more human in their appearance as well. Where
mhm.
towards the beginning of the season, they look more like quote unquote monsters. And as we progress, they start to have more human like features where their bodies resemble humans more and stuff, which I thought was an interesting thing too, that we have some more human like features, even though they technically are not fully human, these spirits.
Well, and they have human like reactions. Like when a brother
Hmm.
dies, one of them is sad and grieves. And that's like juxtaposed with everyone who just wants Yuji dead. Like they're just sitting there like,
Right.
well, he's not a person anymore because he has this evil spirit within him. And I think
Right.
that's also an encapsulation of how they view like these cursed objects, where it's like, well, once you're even like a smidge of a cursed object, you stop being human and it
Hmm.
becomes okay to kill you. And that is like a very black or white way to view that.
Well, even like the way when Yuji like comes back and is like, "Hey guys, I'm alive." The way that they're just like, whatever, just a vessel. And even like Gojo, like introducing him at the sister school event, he's like, "This is Sukuna's vessel." It's like, how about say his name?
Oh
Like, come
gosh.
on.
Well, they even like pointed out that like, oh well, if you weren't Sukuna's vessel, you wouldn't have this power. Like you
Mhm.
just don't matter. And it's very insular,
Yeah.
which is also pointed out by that one guy who is capitalism. What is his name? The guy who like helped Yuji at the beginning, but he like took an office job and he was more corporate with things. And he's
Not
like,
a
Nanami.
Nanami,
Yeah, that's what I
yeah.
was thinking of. Yeah.
And they were like, well, he's very accurate about it, his assessment, where he's like, well, they think they're like teaching higher learning, but actually they're not, and they don't value it. And like there, he has like this very transactional view of it, and it's a different view, but he's also pointing out how he is very similar to everyone else around him. He's just more willing to admit it.
Yeah.
Actually, Nanami is pretty, it was a pretty good character,
I
in my
liked him.
opinion. I really liked that portrayal.
Yeah, he was fascinating when he showed up. I mean, obviously his visually he's like just an aesthetically cool character because he's so
Hmm.
like modern and functional in a way that like we're like in Hogwarts and all of a sudden someone comes in like a suit. Um, but then yeah, his whole story of like yeah, like 9 to 5, and like both of these worlds kind of depress me. Like they both have their issues that I hate, and I just have to figure out how to deal with it. It adds yeah, it's the show has this it's gradually complicating itself throughout. You know, it starts
Yeah,
as very simple. Yuji's athletic, and these are the good guys, and these are the bad guys, and it continually complicates. And he's a great example of that.
yeah.
For sure. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up like the portrayal of women in this show. Thoughts?
I pretty often one note.
Yes.
uh, well, Laura has told me, and I don't know if you can talk about this, Moses, but she talks a lot about manga and the fact that like oftentimes it's not as progressive with women as she would
No.
like to see it. And this is
I
kind of,
honestly had to
yeah.
stop reading Chainsaw Man because I was just like, I can't handle the like my only goal in life is to see boobs. Like, that's too much for me. I'm sorry. This one I know some people have commented on and maybe giving the author a little too much credit where they're like, this is great because the cleavage isn't hanging out for all the characters. And I'm like, is that really the bar that we've set here for some of these women? But I will say though, like having watched a few other anime, like I do think the portrayal is a lot better than other animes that I've watched.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's a sexualization and agency are related issues in the world of I think discussing how marginalized groups, in this case women, are portrayed. But I also think they can be distinct, and so something can fail in one and succeed in the other.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I agree that most of the women characters in the show aren't particularly sexualized, but they're also not particularly uh I'll say agentic or rounded out as early or as fully as the male characters.
Mhm.
You know, every creator has their limitations. I don't know. I haven't read other stuff from Akutami, so I don't know if this is like a recurring thing. I don't know if maybe it's just this world he just made it and couldn't find a place for women or something. But um, it's definitely limited. Yeah, and
Mhm.
I don't know if I'd say it gets better. It gets different, but I don't know if I'd say it gets better. Yeah.
I do appreciate though that like this is one where we don't have situations where like the women are bowing out of fights and stuff like that, or they're
Mm-hmm.
kind of like being pushed to the side a situation in like tense moments. Cause like Nobara, she's right there in all of this. So I do feel like when I watched Food Wars, I was like, I can't take this anymore. That was too much for me. But and that's again with the like extreme sexualization of some of the characters. But yeah, this I think does a lot better job in terms of like there's not as much sexualization, but I would like to see the characters developed more in terms of like giving them the depth that we see in even the villains.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed with Nobara, I texted Laura and I was like, she's very annoying to me at the beginning because she was just kind of like coming in and screaming at people and like exiting stage left. But I did like that we did get her backstory and the fact that, like I said, a lot of people were given like a one no and then it's deeper. I do like that like her motivations were by an older female friend who she was like, hey, this person was ostracized by my community. And I realized like small town life is very limiting. So I want to move to the big city and be better because I don't see myself being accepted there. And I do think that that's an interesting motivation for a woman. As well with Mackie, she her motivation is the lack of acceptance with her community. And that's also interesting. So I do think they have some motivations. I just wish we saw more of them.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's like both of you are saying that it just needs to take it a step further for it to be one of those things where we're like calling it out more and being like, oh yeah, this is a great portrayal. It's at the moment like it's not a bad portrayal, but we'd like it to be at the same level that we're talking about like Goju and Yuji and Megami.
Yeah. I I'm all I have these debates internally where like
Mm-hmm.
I think it's okay for a story to be gendered. Like I think it's totally fine to tell a story about dudes. I think it's great and needed more often tell a story about women. And so with this one, sometimes I'm like, maybe it's just a story about dudes, and I need to accept that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like obviously there's female characters, but it's essentially a story about like four dudes. It's like Gojo,
Yeah.
Yuji, Megumi, and Sukuna. Um, and so I'm always torn. On the one hand, I do think I would even argue that I think Nobara, she gets a lot of like Sakura treatment. Like she's clearly the third wheel in this trio.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an equal
Mm-hmm.
triangle. You know what I mean? Like she's clearly not on the level of the other two in terms of narrative importance. And part of me is like that should change, and part of me is like maybe that's the story that it is. Maybe the next comic he writes will be all women cat. You know what I mean? Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's me as
Or
like a
maybe we
creator
don't want to
trying
read a work by this man about women.
to
Like
right. He's not our go-to for women characters.
yeah.
I do know there has been some discussion online because I don't know that the author has like revealed themselves to anyone, and and I could be very wrong about this. I thought I just read this on Reddit that nobody knows what Akutami looks like or anything. So there was actually speculation like, is this a man? Like we don't know if this is someone who's a man or not. But then I just like Googled earlier today, and there was like an article that was using he, him pronouns in an interview article in a magazine. So I'm assuming that the author is a man, but do not know for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. I do think you have
mostly
a
yeah.
point,
Add any
Moses.
that doesn't like
No,
make it
No,
doesn't
but I
add
do think
anything to the conversation. But besides just me speculating on like there may be like some differences in the way that men and women write, where sometimes I don't know if like you were saying, Moses, like sometimes it's okay for a story to be gendered. That's not always a man's job to feel that they need to write this story for women, that it might be something they don't feel comfortable with.
yeah. I do think that that is a very apt point because even growing up, I joke frequently about like there were so many books that I wouldn't pick up because I was like, those are boy books. I have no interest in a boy book. And I think that that's okay for like people to have different experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to give this writer credit, it's like, yeah, the women are not the strongest characters here, but also they aren't the worst. And like a lot of
No.
them do have different motivations or different levels of anger, and they're not all like the same character, like a la Robert Jordan, where I think a lot of the times it was like same
Yes.
woman, different booby dress. Like
Exactly.
yeah.
right. Yeah. That's some of this. I will confess. Some of this I think is like self absolution. I know I've gotten critique on the agency and frequency of women characters in Forever Desert.
Mm.
And I was like, at the same time I was just writing Forever Desert, I had my YA series, and I was writing them at the same time. And the YA series is all women, and so like part of me, anytime I see an author with not enough female characters, like, but what if they were working on shorts? They were all women characters.
That's fair. Uh, I do think it's an interesting discussion though about like women in manga or anime series that I can't speak to because I do not have that much experience. I was trying to think of any anime
I
I
don't have
watched
tons of
growing up.
experience. I just
Yeah.
know of the few things that I've watched where I was just like, don't like that. So
I was trying to think of any anime I watched growing up, and all I could think of was Digimon. So
There. I mean, I watched Sailor Moon growing up, which is like for our generation, like the
yeah.
women's anime, and then Full Metal Alchemist to me is the best anime ever made, and that was written by a woman. And yeah, I guess we don't know if Gege Akutami is a man or a woman. I will say his writing, their writing feels, you know what I mean? Like, what was that Twitter account like women writing dudes or men writing
Yeah.
women or something like it?
mhm.
I think you can sometimes kind of feel it. I would say this feels like it was written by a man. I could be wrong. Um, but a lot of my favorite authors are women and creators are women. And this, if there is anything in the essence, the ether that makes an author feel gendered, this feels more male.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally get what you're saying. It's funny because Hannah and I were just having a discussion last night before we were recording. I was like talking about a book that I was reading, and I was like, actually, this author does a really great job writing women. It's a man author, so
Yeah.
Yeah. I am interested with the way the season ended, where you have them all meet. And we do find out throughout the series that a teacher of children cannot like promote them. And I was like, that is a good rule to have, but
Mhm.
also can create infighting. So I don't know how
Well,
you combat that.
just imagine how often they would be like trying to promote their own people all the time. It would be a constant issue.
Right. But we have quite a few people who have been promoted to grade one sorcerers. And so that kind of opens it up to like more power and more training in the next one, which I feel like we didn't get as much because we had like random episodes where you thought Yuji was supposed to be dead, which is in my opinion, huge whiplash to have a character like a very motivating character die and everyone maybe grieve them for half a second until and then they're just like off of the screen for episodes, like not with each other. And when they came back together, I was like, wow, that is not very motivating emotionally because none of them seem to care. But I think it's interesting to kind of, I'm interested to see, can I know small spoilers? Do we get back to more of the like Jujutsu Kaisen, like high school, or is it still just like mostly battle scenes or anything like that? Can you guys give me any updates on what to expect with season two? More Mei apparently. And I loved Mei's hair.
More
So
May.
that I'm a huge fan
She's
of
got
that
a
braid.
fantastic braid. I felt like season one was set up for season two. Like I felt like it just needed to get. It's like when somebody's trying to teach you how to play chess for the first time, they just need to explain all the rules. And this piece can move like an L shape, and this one. And then when you finally start playing, that is what season two felt like to me. I was like, oh, like this is why I needed to know all this information.
Okay.
Without spoiling anymore, it's yeah, that felt like
Perfect.
what was going on.
Perfect.
I feel like it definitely, again, is like a big ramp up in
Okay.
terms of what's happening for sure.
Good to know. There is one thing that Laura wanted to discuss, which was the original soundtrack and opening and ending music, because that slapped and we don't know why they
I know. I'm
changed
so
it.
I like I could sing it now. Like I just love that beginning song. And I was curious, Moses, because you're our anime expert here out of the group of us. Like, does this happen often in anime where they change the theme music? Because I've noticed it in at least 3 series that I've watched, and I've always been disappointed because I just got used to that music and dancing along to it, and then it's gone.
Yeah, it's pretty standard. I mean, if they do it right, uh, there's like some that are better than others, and like the fans will remember those ones. Like you'll have the first one always has to be really good because that's the introduction to the show. Second one's typically a little weaker. Third ones can be kind of weak sometimes. But like the fourth one is when it's like, oh, this is super iconic again. I don't know why that pattern is. I don't know what the situation is like behind the scenes, but yeah, yeah.
Somebody
Because
on Reddit said that it's related to shifts in the plot, like that they choose specific songs to like mirror what's happening in the plot. And I was like, oh, well, that's a bummer because I really did not enjoy that shift in this season.
Laura likes when it's happy. I do. It was very funny to have the shift because the original theme is like very, it's called Kaka Katen. I'm sure I butchered that pronunciation. but it's like this cool like shifting of like, oh, they're in the city and it's like all
Mm.
this graphics and it's beautiful. And then we had like this ending where they're dancing and they're having a good time and it's called Lost in Paradise. And then the second one is like Vivid Vice, which is a little bit more like cut scenes of all the different characters shifting through
Which
things.
that I didn't mind as much. It wasn't as much of a bop as
Right. It
the
wasn't, it
beginning.
wasn't, it didn't hit like the first one. And then the second
Mhm.
ending theme is Give It Back, which I think shows a 90s style Dawson's Creek
It's
walking on
sad.
the beach.
It's sad.
They don't want to wait for their lives to be over. And I was very confused by that shift.
Yeah, there's always one of those where it's just this like weird soap operatic opening, emotional and sad. And you're like, why?
Why?
And then I will say season two has a, at least I think it's a banger of an opening. I don't know if it's the first one or the second one. There's an opening in season two that's fantastic, very
Okay.
iconic.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Could
Fun.
we talk just briefly about Gojo and Sakuna or Sukuna, just like them as characters? Because I think that they're easily the most interesting characters. I don't know that we've gone too deep on Sukuna in particular. Any thoughts on Sukuna?
It's kind of what I said about Gojo, I guess, which is apt, but like Sukuna, I like it when very, very, very powerful entities operate on their own logic and just don't
Mhm.
feel beholden to the logic of people less powerful, which I think makes sense at a certain point. It's like your concerns aren't the same. And I think the scene when um Yuji essentially like is it Hanami, right? No, which one? Mahito kind of creates a
The
domain
domain of
expansion. Yeah,
expansion.
thank you.
Mhm.
And then Yuji kind of forces him into contact with Sukuna's soul. That to me was so great for explaining who Sukuna is, which is like he just doesn't want to be bothered by you mortals. Like he's over. Like he has
Mhm.
other things to worry about. And I think the fact that there's this clear, like subtle chess match going on behind the scenes that we're not fully privy to because Yuji's our POV and he doesn't know at all what's going on. It's fascinating and adds like a nice simmer of, it's not of intention because it's not palpable. I don't, if at least for me it wasn't very palpable, but it was cognitively I was aware. I was like, these two are really they're the engines driving everything, and I'm just
Mhm.
seeing like the after image kind of the effects of their thoughts and actions, which is cool.
I think that Sukuna is fascinating to me just from the aspect of like how well plotted this character is because like you're saying that there is all this stuff going on in the background, but like just knowing a little bit more about what's to happen as you're watching this, you're like, oh my gosh, okay, so there were glimmers of this all along that we should have been watching for. Okay. So yeah, I just think that it's fascinating that the author has done a really effective job of setting up this character, making them not quite the I mean, they are like extremely evil, but at the same time, like Sukuna to me is kind of a dynamic villain, really. And it just fascinates me how well this was set up for future plot lines. And I was just like kind of impressed. Like, okay, well, good on you for just like kind of dropping hints about certain characters and then just walking away from it and being like, you know what, we're not going to worry about that now. We're going to talk about Panda for a little bit and his gorilla brother and all this. And we'll forget totally about any kind of pacts, any kind of loyalties, any interests in certain people. Just totally forget about that. And then we'll bring them back later and it'll be extremely important. So, yeah, very well done.
I was fascinated, and this is like a little bit of a tangent with Sukuna. I don't know that much about him. I've only seen season one, but I do love a character who like broke apart pieces of themselves and isn't that worried about all the pieces because he broke enough of him to like exist further on. Because I feel like with a lot of characters in storylines like these, a la, she who must not be named storylines and things like that, there's always this like self preservation in the piece that broke off from you. But there are certain episodes where like Yuji is like, you need me alive because you need to be alive. And Sukuna's like, I actually don't need you. Like I have many pieces of myself and one of them will survive. And I do think like it goes back to what Moses said. It was like he just doesn't care and he's not going to be bothered by the real world or any of the constraints of it because he was powerful enough not to be concerned with it. And I thought that was a very unique perspective for a character like this and very different than what we typically see.
Yes.
Yeah. Because he doesn't want to like he's evil in the sense that if he gets what he wants, a lot of people will suffer, but like he doesn't necessarily care about making people suffer. You know, like
No.
Well,
he's
because
just
he
not
could actively just like appear whenever he wants
right.
and do things, but he's just kind of like, you know what? There's a grander scheme afoot here, so I'm
Yeah.
not gonna be too worried about you doing X, Y, or Z, whatever you're doing with the people at Jujutsu Kaisen. Like, okay,
None of my
Yeah.
business.
And I think it's just like an underrated way of showing intelligence and competence and power. Or like I'm thinking of like The Boys. Sister
yeah.
Soljo's in this last season. She's supposed to be like the smartest person in the world. That's her power. And like she probably still could be. There's still seasons to unfold, but like in that season, you never she's like the opposite of Sukuna in terms of demeanor, where she seems very concerned and very caught off guard and very worried. It's like, well, then how much above these people are you really? And I think with Sukuna, showing him that way just reinforces, even if we don't get to see him like constantly blow up cities, you know, which another series might do. We're like, yeah, this guy seems way above all this. Like, I don't know, really know what he's about, but we're not yet on the level, you know, where he should be really concerned.
Yeah, it kind of puts things into perspective for us as viewers too, I suppose, as to like the yeah, when you're talking about like the grander scheme of things, like is any of this important? Likely
Right.
not too much. I mean, it's a lot of development here, but I don't know that this is going to be that helpful.
No.
Which is why season 2 is so good. I
I
can't wait
did
for you
like
to
in
watch it.
season 1 where they were like, now don't eat the finger. And then Sukuna just ate it out of
His
his
hand.
hand.
He was like, I didn't tell him to do that.
And they all blamed him for some reason. And I was like, that was not him.
The logic there went out the window where Megumi's like, yeah, I guess we'll let you hold it since you're the strongest among us. I'm like, what? No.
Sukuna can literally produce a hand mouth.
Terrible
like, don't let him
idea.
touch that. So that is very funny.
Oh, we didn't talk about Toto.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Boy. Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone hates him.
I can understand why, because I definitely hated him when he first showed up. I was like, oh, this
Yeah.
guy sucks. Especially he's like, oh, what kind of girls do you like? I was like, oh god.
Jennifer Lawrence.
You know,
Oh,
something no one has ever said in the
right.
universe.
Yeah. I was like, this is so
Who was the other person they brought up?
uninteresting.
Sebastian Stan. Was that who it
Sebastian
was?
Stan. That
Okay.
was. Have you ever seen Sebastian Stan?
Oh,
And I was
He's
like,
so
okay.
muscular, and I was like, really? He's in movies with Chris Hemsworth. What are you talking
right, yeah,
about?
He's not the most muscular guy in any of the movies he's in.
Right?
No.
Yeah, like when Toto first got introduced, I was like, this sucks. I'm gonna hate this guy. But then like yeah, he grew on me, and I don't know if I know why, to be honest. Part of it is that he's like uber competent. Like he genuinely is very good at what he does. And he's got a wicked cool power. And so and it's like, I don't know if any of you, if you guys watch My Hero or you know of My Hero, but there's a character named Mirio who's like similar, where like if you were told what their power is, you'd be like, kind of sucks. Like compared to like I can shoot fire out of my eyes, or I can, like, you know what I mean? Like, I could do all these other amazing things. But because of how they use it with such ingenuity, like it seems kind of busted. Like it's a little overpowered, you know, what they can do with it. And so I earned a lot of respect for him there. And I came to just accept that he's going to talk about big booties or whatever he likes.
I think it's interesting because we keep coming back to like competency, and I wonder how often we get to see competency in shows, because I think a lot of times like people, they want, for some reason, people create shows where people like fall into decision making or fall into the right choice. But this is a show that really values like, no, I know exactly what I'm doing and I'm going to kick your ass about it. Like, and that's it. And I do think that's very much with Toto, where he was annoying and grating at the beginning because he just like came in and it's like, I can beat you up and I will continue to beat you up. But then he becomes like weirdly charming halfway through, where you're like, oh, he's just someone who no one likes, but he likes everyone, I guess, if he's on
He
their
has
side.
like a desire for community too, which is like not expected, honestly, because then
Yeah.
he really wants to have like this friendship and brotherhood with Yuji to the point that Yuji's like, I'm running away from you.
To the point where he makes up their own backstory. And he was like, we were so close in middle school.
He's like, we didn't even go to the same middle school.
And
Oh.
yeah, he's like he becomes everyone's big brother in a way, especially at the
Mhm.
end. He's the one who is responsible for recommending them for, and like, yeah, he's like, and once he's your brother, he's literally like family. He's like, I don't,
Yeah.
if we weren't
Mhm.
family, I don't know if I would like him, but we are family, so I love him. I feel
Yeah.
like that's kind of how I feel about something.
And
And
we all
the
have
Black
that family
Flash is
member.
really cool
Right.
too.
It is.
That is cool. He was so good in that arc at the
Hmm.
school with fighting the different curses and just like helping Yuji like become a better sorcerer in a way where he's just like, no, this is how you do it. And he's also an effective teacher who's just going to throw you in the deep end instead of like Gojo who's going to trust you and like lead you there. He's like, no, 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 I'll fight with you, but like you're on your own too, and I will let you get beat up.
Yuji's like learning through all of these other people, honestly, to shape his own experience and develop really because like he's in such a unique experience that I don't know that there's any of them that can fully relate, but he's able to like take away all of these things from all of the other characters like Nanami and Toto and like all sorts of Megami, Gojo. And so I think that's a really unique way to portray Yuji too, is just how he's able to grow through the other characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. You had said, Hannah, you said something earlier about competence and why maybe it works well here. And I think about that a lot with writing, where I think so many stories kind of get by on like creating plot complications through incompetence.
Hmm.
There's like the 3-year-old kid and they're all hiding in the basement and the zombies are walking. The kid's like, I want to play toys. And everyone's like, oh, now we gotta die because they hurt it. It's so like there's a place for that. But I feel like the better stories just make the world difficult enough that if you're incompetent, you're not even going to show up on screen. At this point, you
Hmm.
probably died 50 years ago. And so everyone on screen is competent to varying degrees. And you get to see the levels of it and how that impacts their life. And so when somebody fails, it's not because they're an idiot. It's because somebody else is a lot better or because I think they're trying just really, really hard. Like, they don't have to be dumb to fail. And I think that's such an important storytelling device because I think it kind of mirrors life too. Like most of the time
Hmm.
we fail, it's not because we're like complete morons, because life is really hard. Things are
Yeah.
very
Hmm.
complicated. And I like that this show in manga sticks to that.
Yeah. I also do want to say Toja, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Unamaki. His
With the
power is
speech
the
power.
scariest to me. Like I feel and I also feel awful for him. Like he can't speak. He speaks in like
Hmm.
fish nomenclature because he can't be trusted to like not say something that won't like manifest into reality. And that is very sad to me. And I hope we get to see more of him in future seasons. And I'm not sure we will, but that's really impressive as a power. And I was very interested in that.
It's super.
Yeah, I think that he's really cool too. And I think it's interesting just the way that like their outfits are even drawn, where like his comes up to cover his mouth versus like Gojo with his eye covering
Hmm.
and some of them that have their eyes covered. I think that that's really a unique way to depict how they have to conceal their powers and for the protection of themselves and others.
Yeah. Well, and they get to design their own uniforms. You find that out in the first couple
Hmm.
episodes. So,
Right.
and uh, Yuji didn't get to design his because he didn't find
No.
out about it. So, any final thoughts that we haven't covered?
Any favorite characters or moments?
I mean, Gojo, of course, but I do feel like,
Go-
yeah,
Gojo is my favorite, but Megami is my second favorite.
he was very good. I liked him a lot. I feel like we didn't get to talk about him enough. Do you feel like we've talked about him enough for your liking, Laura, or never?
I mean, I don't know that there's too much to say about Megami, just that he has kind of a he starts to develop a little bit of a complex about how good he is
Mm,
because there's all this focus put on Yuji, which I think is interesting too, because he is trying to be supportive of Yuji, but at the same time, a little bit like, yeah, but I must suck apparently because Gojo and nobody else cares about me. And so I do like that moment that we get at the end where Gojo's like, look, you are really great too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't discount yourself here. So I do think that's a really interesting portrayal, and we'll get more of Megami, and Megami becomes more interesting, I think.
I like that there's no forced or overly forced rivalry between Megami and Yuji, um, or any of the students really. Like
Hmm.
they're just there to support each other and take care of each other, which again is reinforced by how brutal the world outside of school is. Like it would be pretty stupid of them to be bickering over what are very small things. Meanwhile, Sukuna has this master plan that whatever is unfolding that they're about to be exposed to potentially. So yeah, I appreciated it. We didn't get like a needless like 4 episodes of Megumi and Yuji like competing in basketball and then fighting over a girl. Just some dumb stuff. Like
Hmm.
they're both competent and working towards something meaningful. And like Megumi's a badass, and yeah, his self doubt felt very natural. Like it didn't
Hmm.
feel weird. And
It did feel very natural. I felt like it was also interesting because he also seems to have a little bit of guilt wrapped into that, where he's like, well, I am the reason that Yuji is so powerful because he did this to
Hmm.
save me and save the people around him. So like, can I really be mad about that? And I was like, oh, that's a very interesting take and
He's a
very
bit
like
of a
mature.
sad boy in general.
I mean, yeah.
Because when you get the story about like his situation with his sister and everything, like, oh gosh, he does carry a lot of guilt.
Mhm. And he's just punting that ball to make everyone better.
Mhm.
So
Baseball, like all the strategies in baseball reveal all.
Yuji's always going to go for that home run. Um,
Solo
I think
Gojo.
one of my standout characters was Maki. I just really like the foundation for her character. I think it's really interesting to have someone who wants to be powerful but knows that like people don't value her power in a specific way, and then fighting for that place on the team and fighting to say like, no, I deserve a spot and I'm going to be powerful and I'm going to come back and prove you all wrong. Is it healthy? Probably not. But I do think it's interesting to watch a character like that with those types of motivations, especially when, like we were saying, it's more complex with the female characters in this show. So I
Mhm.
think she was definitely a standout character for me, especially when you take into consideration her very complicated relationship with May. It was very heartbreaking to see like two sisters fundamentally not understand each other.
Mhm. She gets more heartbreaking.
No, of course she does. I always like the sad character. I always like the characters
You
who
like
end
a
up dead.
tragedy, Hannah. You're drawn to a tragedy.
You were drawn to the sad boys, so
I know. I'm opposite ends of the spectrum here, Megami and Gojo. Moses, what about you?
I mean, y'all were gracious. We talked about all my favorites. I think Gojo is one of the coolest characters and I've read in a while. He's fascinating. Um, yeah, Toto is fun. Toto
yeah.
a lot. I think May's well from season one. There's not a lot to talk about, but Mei as a character overall is wild and interesting. Um, I like Maki. I like Inumaki. Super cool. Yeah, I like this. I feel like the series is quality over quantity. There's not
Yeah.
a huge ensemble cast, but each of them is unique and interesting and worthy of the screen time for the most part. There's a couple that are kind of irrelevant and they don't get much screen time. They don't deserve it.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
yeah.
Watch out, we're gonna have Panda come in and scream, why didn't you say Panda? That's the right answer.
All right, yeah. Sorry, Panda. Sorry.
Well, we'll
Any
just
final thoughts or
yeah.
anything?
I it's a great show. I was told to watch it for the fight scenes, and that was part of why I watched it. But I do think like the show is incredible for how it um the kind of slow unfold of the plot and how it places its characters very delicately. It feels extremely well architectured. The further and further you get into it, especially the after season one, but before season two, there's like the season zero. It's like
Mm.
6 episodes.
Oh,
Little that to
yeah.
me is like absolute cinema. What's that like Martin Scorsese meme? It's like it's incredible. It's yeah. Season one is very good, and the series only gets better from there. I have a ton of respect for this series. So
Well, you'll have to come on to discuss season two.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
I'll nerd out. It's going to be embarrassing.
Perfect. Well, Moses,
Well,
can you
thanks so
tell
much.
everyone where to find you?
Don't find me. I like my privacy, but if you must, I write books. I have a website, mosesoseUtomi.com. The Forever Desert trilogy, the last book comes out this summer. And my young adult duology called The Sisters of the Mud. It's a YA fantasy, West African inspired. The second book and the last book comes out next month in like just over a month from now.
Well,
This is a big year for you then. Wow.
I'm very busy this year. Yeah, it's been fun.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and
thanks so much.
talk Jujutsu Kaisen with us. And there's a standing invitation to come back whenever you want to nerd out. So,
and listeners, you've heard it a million times. Go read the Forever Desert series.
If this were a visual podcast, you would see them right behind Laura's shoulders.
I purposely moved them down so they would be within view.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Join us tomorrow as we get back to our regular scheduled content and our discussion of the obelisk or obelisk gate, if I'm feeling fancy, on the characters and themes of those books. So thank you so much, Moses. Bye.
Bye.